Speak the charm of make, charm of make, charm of make, charm of make.
There will come a time on the planet Earth when science and technology will be long forgotten, when wizards will rule the world.
This is the Arnemancy Podcast. The world is weirder than we know. Join your host, Reverend Eric, and his diverse array of amazing guests in an exploration of tarot, magic, the occult, and the history of Western esotericism. The Arnemancy Podcast exists thanks to the support of generous listeners like you. Please consider supporting this podcast for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/Arnemancy. Welcome back to the podcast. This is a very Enochian Christmas with Cliff. Cliff is the author behind Enochian Today. He's been doing ceremonial magic for about 20 years, which is great. That's a lot of experience. But the thing that we're really going to be getting into today is the stuff that he's been working on for about the last 2 years, which is sort of like a deep dive into Enochian magic. If you follow his blog, you've seen he's been working really hard on it, and he's written Sam Blockian level blog posts, many hundreds, maybe thousands of words, filled with his experiments and his successes and failures and his process. And it's pretty fascinating to see all that stuff sort of, on display as somebody's going through it. And now we're going to get a little bit of the inside story. Hi, Cliff. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, Rev. It's good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So your first blog post about Enochian, I think, was on July 11th, 2020. So about a year and a half ago.
Jeez, yeah.
And you were basically talking about like your plan, like how you were going to progress through Enochian. And in that blog post, I'll have a link to it in the show notes. So if anybody wants to like follow your journey from the beginning, they can go start there. But you kind of talked about a lot of the sources you were going to. A lot of the things you were looking through. Now, Enochian is getting, people are talking about it a lot more, but why don't you give us a little rundown, like, what the heck is it?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, try to describe quantum mechanics, in 3 simple words. It is tough, isn't it?
The standard model doesn't solve everything. Oh, shit, that's like 5 words.
That was close. That's pretty close. What I would say is that Enochian is something of a transitional piece of magic that I think is a useful bridge to a lot of what was going on with John Dee and Edward Kelley, who was his scryer, and the work that John Dee in particular was doing at the time. The history is long and complicated, but it basically boils down to a lot of astrology, a lot of elemental magic, as well as a lot of what you would call the Merkava or the Hekalo tradition in Jewish mysticism. And what I would say is that it's not always clean. And the funny thing, it really is what I would call a true transmission, because if you look at a lot of the details and the amount, what's the word I'm looking for? The Occam's razor. If you were to apply Occam's razor to this, it's impossible to make the argument that this is just something that some guy made up, or that somebody just synthesized from other sources. This really is what I would call a true transmission, and we can get into the details of that. Some of that, but it's mind blowing, the amount of stuff. So it happened. The whole transmission took place over 6 years. And basically, Dee and Kelley got what is today, still to this day, a very powerful system of magic that people are getting into, and still new discoveries are being made. And it's the fact that it's still taking place, that we're still getting new documents that hadn't been discovered before, and that new connections across them are being made, really speaks to both the power and, frankly, in my view, the legitimacy of the system of magic on its own, even though we should always keep in mind that we need to consider the context in which this occurred. So we're talking around contemporaneous with Agrippa, a lot of Elizabethan England in both in a lot of the elements and stuff like that. But that's the very short short, as short as I can possibly make an introduction to Enochian.
Yeah, I think actually maybe just to add like a tiny bit more historical context, Dee was kind of like the last of the Renaissance super wizards.
Yes.
Maybe
yes.
Robert Flood was the absolute last, but like Dee was contemporary with Johannes Kepler. He was just before Galileo. So this is like, the scientific revolution is like just about happening. Dee is still talking to angels, but he's also obsessed with mathematics and all this kind of stuff. But like,
and optics.
and
really making some discoveries there. And it's funny looking back, reading Dee, researching Dee, and realizing what he knows and what he doesn't know, and yet what's coming through in spite of what he doesn't know. Like if I could just really quickly, like one big thing is Kabbalah. If you read his Monas Hieroglyphica, and you read through what's going on with that, and he starts getting excited about making these cross additional, like, this is going to be very nerdy. I'm just going to tell people to like skip down to the part where where he has numbers being added across each other. But if you skip down to that and you realize that what he was doing was, I'm forgetting, I think it was Tamura, one of the Hebrew methods of substituting numbers for letters. At any rate, he didn't know exactly how any of that worked, but he's doing what I conclude to be just like, he thinks he knows what's going on. He's getting it all wrong, but he's getting some ideas. So some of this information is filtering to him, but it's definitely not like the pure kind of Kabbalah that was available at the time, if you were in the right place at the right time.
Which he wasn't,
So, he was not. Yeah.
So, actually, like that's also some interesting timeline stuff, because the 1570s, when Dee was sort of working on this stuff, was the beginning of Lurianic Kabbalah.
Yeah, he wouldn't have had access to any of that.
Right.
And so it was like a whole, might as well have been on Mars as far as Dee was concerned, or at least, he couldn't have had access to it. And yet, the reason I mentioned legitimacy earlier is that what the angels are telling him is Hebrew correspondences and Hebrew and information that there's no way that he could have had access to it. Just to really quickly, the Sigillum de Ameth, when Michael is referring to how he's indirectly referring to how the numbers on the outside ring need to add up to 441, because if you add it up to 440, that means death, whereas 441 means truth. Dee didn't have access to those correspondences. He didn't know what that meant.
Right.
He didn't know, there's no way. And so this is like, why I just get excited, and I want to like tell people like, there's something real going on here. There's something happening here. So that's why I get excited. I want to tell people about it, but I also have to acknowledge not everybody's interested in this. But if you're listening now, you
are interested, so. Definitely. And we're not even to the juicy parts yet.
Right.
Okay, hold on. I want to clear up something that you just said a little earlier. I think I might have misheard you. I think at one point you said that you didn't consider Enochian to be a true transmission, but then a minute later, I think you said that it was a true transmission. Okay, so I just misheard you.
Definitely.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
I was kind of like, wait, hold on. What?
Definitely. It definitely is. And if I'm prone to misspeaking too, so oh well.
Well, then maybe I can fix it in post, as we say.
No worries.
I mean, one of the impressions that I've got from listening to people talk about this before, like I haven't gone back and read Dee's original notebooks or any of the stuff that is available. It's kind of confusing to figure out where to get started. But one of the impressions that I've had is that the system of magic that's given to Dee and Kelley evolves. So it sort of starts in one way and ends up evolving into something completely different, or even something more complex, or something of that nature. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what happened?
Yeah. So the initial transmission, it's almost like you're tuning. If you could imagine the old school radio dials, where you're tuning into something, and half the audience just fell asleep. But if you're getting a lousy transmission, right, and you're trying to like home in precisely on what frequency that's happening. It seems like early on, when Edward Kelley is getting that, we get certain issues. Like we get the Archangel Uriel showing up. And then what happens is that it turns out, no, that wasn't Uriel. that was because they just gave you this false kind of thing. It looked just like a grimoire, a sigil of the time,
Mm-hmm.
and that was false. That was a false sigil. So that was the fake one. So you have to go. Here's the real Uriel. And it's like, what's going on? So, but it seems like, okay, they're trying to get in on this transmission. They kind of screw up there, but then they come back, and it seems like it's about sort of finding exactly where along that dial that poor Edward Kelley needs to, like, stick his mind at and hear. And we see this again, with other episodes too, where like the original Watchtower table, well, it turns out that we got the correspondences wrong. So the tablets are all right, but they're in the wrong placements on this great table. So we need to give you the revised, Watchtower table. And it's like, what's going on here? But it's, I mean, if I'm a psychic and I'm having like very, very crystal clear visions, and oh, by the way, I need to make a correction here and there. Well, it's like these like people who have like these super powered memories,
Mm-hmm.
and they're told to like look at something for a split second, and then they take it away, and then they show the thing again. They have to figure out like where 3 pixels were altered,
Right.
and they're able to do it. It's kind of like that. It's like, okay, well, here's you almost got it. Now we'll show you the 3 pixels that need to be altered, and sometimes it can be like changing an entire configuration of something. So I think that's the level of difficulty, except you have to do it not with memory, but with psychic stuff. So I'm not going to like lay any blame on poor Edward Kelley for having to redo some stuff.
Yeah, he had a rough time with things.
He did. And the guy was half of Dee's age. And so I couldn't imagine being in my 20s and having to be able to handle all of this. It's tough.
Even being able to handle Dee himself, like he comes across as a very intimidating sort of person. It would be just tough dealing with him.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's a genius. The guy's got political influence, and yet you're also kind of, you as in you, Edward Kelley. Edward Kelley was a bit of a hot shot. At one point, he goes into Dee's diaries, and where Dee has written down that Dee has confirmed that, basically Edward Kelley is something of a crook or a fraud or has some kind of charlatan. You have the audacity to go in, scratch that out, and say there's no such, that's not true at all. Clearly in your own handwriting. Like, what do you like? There's something good. Like, what are you doing, dude? This is your meal ticket, and you're messing. But I mean, I'm clearly paraphrasing, but it's just like their dynamic was interesting, and yet. John Dee was brilliant, and he did teach Edward Kelley a lot of stuff, and so I think there was some genuine affection that he had for Edward Kelley, but he was on a mission. John Dee was on a mission.
John Dee was on a mission. Yeah, yes. For sure.
On a mission from God.
Or to God.
Or to God, yes.
In your process, you talk about this ritual called Gebofal. Am I saying that right? Am I saying it the way you say it?
Well, I take the pronunciation from Aaron Leach, which is Gebofal, and if somebody knows the pronunciation, Gebofal,
okay.
So there it is.
I'm writing it with a J.
I know. Why couldn't they spell back then? Why couldn't anybody spell that?
I don't know. Why can't G just make one noise?
Exactly.
I mean, I guess we probably screw it up by calling it G. We should call it Gi.
Gi, yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true. But yeah. So Gebofal is interesting. It's so the first part that comes through of this transmission, just taking a quick step back, is the Heptarchy, right? Which is this idea. It kind of is reflecting old England, where you had the 7 kingdoms, and then they were sort of united, possibly under King Arthur or maybe another king. But what preceded Arthur was the Heptarchy, the 7 kingdoms. So what happens with Dee and Edward Kelley is that they get this transmission. Well, here's an angelic Heptarchy, and so you need to be interacting with this thing, and so this is the message that they get from the angels. So the Heptarchy, going back to that root word for 7 being 7 kings and 7 princes. Each king has a prince, but that's not quite true, because there's also an 8th king, as well as an 8th prince, who's sort of like in my experience, they're sort of in the background, and they're able to like switch stuff up. So just to give you a quick example, I did some work. I did a working today, and today is Sunday. But I really needed to also make sure I got the Saturnian king Benapsin in there. So I called on the eighth king Karmara, and I said, please let me switch up the day that I can do this. And Karmara's like, well, okay. So he sort of allows a little bit of flexibility to the rules that you would otherwise in the typical grimoire fashion, you would usually call up the king and the prince on the proper day of the week.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one for each day of the week slash planet in the sky, astrological planet that would have been visible to John Dee back in the day. And so what do they do? Well, Scott Stenwick and others have sort of observed, well, it seems like that these kings are more or less following a Sephirotic. So basically the Sephira from Yesod all the way up to Binah. And then the princes are more like the planetary powers associated with that. It's kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, if you look at their descriptions, for example, King Benapsin, he has, among other powers, the power to cast out wicked spirits. And that's exactly what you would expect from Saturn, right? Saturn is, you can either curse somebody with wicked spirits or remove a curse or remove wicked spirits from the area, just as one example.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first part. And the second part is what's associated with Gebofal, which is Liber Logaeth, which is this very long book filled with tables, not pictures of tables. I'm talking, go back to, eighth grade math where you have tables of rows and columns, right? And so in that, what is the deal with that? It's not entirely clear. I have started scratching the surface as to how that relates to the third part, and I'll get to that in a second. But basically, imagine a 49 by 49 table filled with letters. Now, if you do the math on that, that's 2,401 letters. The majority of those tables look like that. There are some exceptions, where like the last 20 roughly tables, 19 tables, 19 or 20, my math is failing me at this point. They have every other letter filled in. And sometimes it starts out with, yes, there's the first letter is there, first, third, and seventh, and the other half of the page, it's second, fourth, sixth, etc. So the evens versus the odds. When Edward Kelley receives this, he receives it in English letters, right? So now Enochian, just to back up another step here, Enochian also has with it its own special alphabet, with which the Enochian language is written in.
Mm-hmm.
So what the angels then go ahead and say to John Dee and Edward Kelley is, okay, great, thanks for taking the extra special time it takes to write down 49 pages front and back of tables, more or less, almost all of them being filled with individual letters. The first table, by the way, is nothing but rows of words in Enochian, which that in itself, right, which means you have to write down 2,401 words, one per cell. Instead of doing it in cells, they just wrote it out longhand because it was too much. I wound up redoing that when I
Wait, hold on.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it
yeah.
was
Go ahead.
actually, so the first table was basically like an essay.
Who
Or a
knows what it
prayer or
actually was?
something.
Yeah, who knows what it is, man? I mean, it's like
But do we?
I look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we have the words. So we have the Enochian words that are spelling it out.
Yeah, it's some kind of words. People who have looked at it with more expertise in linguistics than I have
Mm-hmm.
suggested that this might be more of like a proto-Enochian or a step above Enochian. Because there's some crossover with some of the words, but it's not clear exactly how those two things, how they relate to each other, how the language that is received later on in the system, in part 3 of the system, relates back to what they're seeing in this second part, in the Liber Logaeth.
Oh, wait. Okay.
Yeah. So it's, go ahead.
Okay, so what you're saying is the Liber Logaeth, it was received before the Enochian language was received.
Yes.
So whatever this language was for table number 1, It's unknown. It's an unsolved puzzle.
We don't know. We don't know what it is.
Huh.
Some of it, like occasionally, the problem is like, even though there was 6 years of these workings, it's really not clear. Using medieval technology, which is to say a straight edge, writing stuff down as fast as you can, having to pause so that your handwriting can keep up with it. I mean, that's a lot of work. I couldn't imagine having to do all of that. So who knows what, only I'm guessing, like, not every single angelic explanation of what's going on was written down, or if it was, I mean, we don't know exactly what Edward Kelley's process was for receiving it. It just sounded intense, but yeah, we don't, but from a linguistic analysis, it's tough to say. But I would need to, so let's put a pin in that really quickly. I'll come back to that to speak a little bit about getting from the language in the second part to the third. So really quickly, the Edward Kelley needs to write all this down. He writes down all of these, tons and tons of tables. I'm sure he's got writer's cramp. But although if you look through the tables, to be honest with you, it's obvious that more than one person, I'd say about 3, maybe 4 people were writing it down.
So it wasn't clear, just D and Kelley.
No, if you look at the handwriting, I'm guessing at least 3 or 4 people.
That's
were
really
writing.
Interesting.
My guess is that like Arthur D probably helped at some point, John D's son, and possibly whoever else was around at the time. I've taken some looks at the diaries, but the handwriting is not always the greatest, especially John D's. Mainly probably because he's writing so fast. I'm not going to blame him, especially considering my own handwriting. But but yeah, looking at it, it seems pretty clear that that there was more than one person writing it. But so what happens after they receive all this? Well, then apparently they needed to write the whole thing down again, except in Enochian letters and reversing the order. Now, I've only given you like this surface. Yeah, you're kind of you're blanching at this. Now let me give you the part that I left out. Was that for some of if all of these were tended to be written normally, right? Just English letters left to right, blah blah blah. But now imagine you turn the page 45 degrees, and then you start writing in the diagonals. You're writing these letters diagonally in a diagonal fashion.
But oh my God, that's
okay. Part of it. That's just one part of it. Then imagine doing that again, rotating the whole thing 90 degrees, and you have to write it diagonally the opposite direction. From the bottom to the top. And then there are some tables where there's like 5 rows where it's all like just normal left to right, and then partway through down, the next 44, you need to write it in this weird, crazy diagonal way. Now imagine hearing that, oh yeah, you got to transcribe all this and do it all right to left instead of left to right. Good luck.
No.
No.
But you did this. Like
yeah,
you copied the. So first of all, you went through a process to get access to like a legible copy of the Liber Logaeth.
Yes.
And that sounded like a bit of a treasure hunt.
It was so. Yeah, I found a copy. If you search Liber Logaeth PDF, I'm sure it's from this group called AOM. I forget I'm not going to even remember the name. It's a Greek, I think, name, but they had done a transcription. The problem is that they had done it left to right instead of switching the direction. So, okay, well, what do you care? Well, I don't really care that much, but I just wanted to look at it. Plus, I also wanted to see the originals. So I wanted to keep that as like a reference copy. There's also, if you go to a site, Condor, that's KONDOR.de, and I'll go ahead and let you write that down, by Stefan Klemenk, I think his name is off the top of my head. But at any rate, he's got a really good version, but that's at least in English letters. So the problem is that you're reading handwriting, right? And you're making some calls. And now the problem is it's not just handwriting, it's handwriting from the 16th century. And so you're trying to like say, okay, what are they? A lot of the standardization was not quite there yet. And the other thing too is that Edward Kelley in particular, from, I'm trying to remember whose podcast this is on. I apologize for not having all the sources at the top of mind, but memory's not the same as it was when I was in my 20s, right? But the gentleman was talking about how Edward Kelley, I want to say this was Esoterica. I'll say it Esoterica with Justin Sledge. They were talking about how Edward Kelley seems to have had some kind of background as copying stuff shorthand, and so they're realizing this, looking at the handwriting that he had and the way certain letters were formed. So if you imagine printing like the letter U, how you would do it nowadays, the letter U.
Mm-hmm.
Now imagine putting a slash through the top of that letter U, right? Now, what does that look like? Well, it looks like the letter A,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you put a horizontal slash through the top, does that mean that he meant to write the letter A, or does that mean that he wished to say that this is the letter U pronounced as a vowel or pronounced like oo instead of right?
Yeah.
And the answer is, I don't know. That's the answer. I don't know. So this is the problem, is that you have to wind up making a lot of decisions and trying to figure out what is this. And what I realized at the end of this is you just got to respect the humanity of the process. You're going to make mistakes, and it's okay.
So how many days did it take you to do the tables? First of all, how many of these tables are there?
There are 40. Okay, so the first 48 pages are front to back tables, so that's 96.
Okay.
The last page is the 49th page, is front and back 5 tables, but mercifully they are 5 3x7 tables. But the little wrinkle with that is that if you do the math on that, that's 105, but they were given 112 letters, so you have to figure out how you're supposed to reduce that. And I have a rationale for that on my blog about how you're supposed to how I think one might do that.
Okay.
I'm not going to say how the right way to do it. I have to be very careful. I don't want to say this is the right way because I say so. But there are a bunch.
Uh-huh.
And how long it took me to do? Well, the original instructions to Dee and Kelley, which they definitely did not meet, was that they needed to spend 40 days doing it.
Ufta.
Which is, Ufta is right. Definitely got. We're fellow Scandinavians from the Midwest.
Yep.
I'm not there now, but I haven't forgotten my roots. It was not. That's not feasible for a human being. Now, what I will say is that I did spend 7.5 months. Every spare moment that I had, and I mean absolutely every spare moment, that includes waiting for an appointment to start, what have you, just lugging this around with me, trying to complete it. And I will say that of that, if you were to multiply 40 24-hour days over and then spread it across those 7.5 months, that's about how long it took me. If you had fewer responsibilities than I had, then maybe it would take you less time. And congratulations, I'm in awe of anybody who can do this 40 days, or not.
Right,
it's not an easy process.
God, that sounds like a really, really difficult and dedicated process. And
Yes.
then once you finish transcribing the Liber Logaeth, then the work has just begun.
Well, I thought
Because
I was just going to spike the football, but yeah.
I mean, you haven't even done the Gebofal working at that point. You've just transcribed tables.
That's right. So, but yes. So let me take a step back into like what the process felt like, and then we can get into the actual Gebofal or Gebofal recreation ritual.
Okay.
Actually doing that, you would think, oh, you're just writing a bunch of letters. Who cares, What it feels like is a very, very subtle opening of individual subtle bodies, points within your larger subtle body, individual points within that. The energy starts flowing easier within you.
Mm-hmm.
It really is like kind of this very nerdy sanctification process, and feel free to quote me on that, even though I obviously I'm very respectful of the angels, but nerdy has been reclaimed by us nerds.
Very
But yeah, it's a
nerdy
very much
sanctification
sanctification.
process.
Exactly. That's my band name, by the way, my next band name. uh, so you're doing that, and your whole system slowly but surely, drip by drip, sort of opens up, right? And it's like you're unlocking, a million little locks within you. And it's hard to describe other than that. So unless if you've done any kind of Eastern subtle body work, meditation, stuff like that, and you've had any kind of experience kundalini, imagine like a little teeny versions of that happening within you over that process. It was great. It was, kind of what you would expect something holy to feel like.
Hmm.
And so if you have the means, I highly recommend picking that up and getting it done.
All
But
40 days.
all 40 days,
Okay.
yeah. And then getting to the process itself, yeah. So we don't have a lot of information. I took a means to do this that's publicly available, that I said, okay, well, and the process that was laid out. So if you were to search out, something like that, Liber Logaeth, some kind of PDF associated with Gebofal. If you do that enough, and you get past my website, in which I'm just singing the praises of this, then you'll find that I may have it linked in one of the earlier blog posts. But suffice it to say that I did a little tweaking of that. So that process involved doing doing Ave's prayer to Enoch, the angel Ave, as it was transmitted to Dee and Kelley. But then what I decided to do, and then also making the calls. And the decision that I made was to make the calls in reverse order. Why is that? Well, there's this phrase that crops up in the diaries, John Dee's diaries: "The last shall be first, and the first shall be last." Or I probably have inverted that, but that's a phrase from the Bible where Jesus is saying that. So that it's Jesus in that context is talking about, it's kind of like the idea of the meek shall inherit the earth and the tyrants won't be in charge
Hmm.
anymore, that sort of thing. But so the angels really had a field day with that one. They really enjoyed that. So what I decided to do was take what I got as a template and sort of change it a little bit. I decided to do all the calls in reverse order. So the calls are, for those of you who don't know, it's this Enochian language key to unlock higher states of consciousness. And I decided to do each of these one call 3 times a day for 49 days, because there are 49 calls in all. But one of which is not to be spoken. I'll touch on that really briefly. So, but suffice it to say, I started from the back and worked my way forwards. And every time I would put my hand on the book of Liber Logaeth associated with that, starting with what is the last table, which is the last page, which is the 5 tables that are only 3 by 7, and then working my way all the way up
Oh,
to that very first one. Yeah. So
so
yes, go ahead.
the Liber Logaeth, the one that you spent all this time on, was
Mm-hmm.
basically a talisman that you used in the working of the calls.
Yeah, that's how I chose to do it.
Oh,
Yes.
that's
I mean,
fascinating.
I
Okay.
had made the calls before, separately when I had first run through the Aethers, but this time I decided, okay, I'm gonna like incorporate as much as I know about Enochian, because Dee and Kelley, they only had the Heptarchy at first, but let me go ahead and actually incorporate everything that I have now, because this is the best that I can do to try to recreate what they had.
Mm-hmm.
So I would put like for the first call of the day, first time I made the call in a day, I would put my hand on the back of that page, and then I would put it on the front of that page, and then the last in the evening I'd put it between my hands, like and hold it upright as if in
Right,
prayer.
like a prayer. Okay.
Like a prayer, exactly. And I would, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, and then when you were doing this, so like one of the big things that that Dee and Kelley are at least famous for is sort of like the scrying, the seeing stone
Yes.
and that kind of stuff. So while you were doing this, were you also doing some sort of like spirit contact or scrying work at the same time?
Yes, absolutely. So what if you've ever done the calls, then the experience, everybody has a different experience that goes with that. I tell people who are just beginning, sometimes some people just like feel something. So one person who I did it with live felt heat and warmth on the side of their face.
Mm-hmm.
Other people just feel a general sense of bliss. I had one person who I did the call for, and she said, whose mind is like always running because she's very, very smart. She said that she finally got a moment where like the loud always thinking, the constant treadmill of thoughts stopped. And it's like she got a
Oh, wow.
respite from that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So everybody experiences differently. But me, I'm like kind of okay at different things. So I was able to have a vision. Mine tend to be visual and meaning and sometimes an actual message in words. But yeah, what would happen is, so let me just really quick, let me back up briefly. So every day for the 7 weeks, I would, on that day, I would be calling one of the heptarchical kings. So that way, all of the kings were called 7 times each.
Okay.
So I wanted to point that out. But yeah, so when you're going through if you've ever done the aethers, it's you'll get some kind of vision that goes along with that, something meaningful. And what will happen is that you'll if you do this with Gebofal, first of all, like the experience of it, putting your hand on that and then making the call, it's like you put jet fuel in your car instead of gasoline. It's like
Mhm.
the difference between the two is substantial. Let's put it that way. It's an exponential difference. But if you do that, so I could feel the energy coming up off of the page into my hand, and it was a whole subtle body energetic experience. So I would do that, and then what would happen is, so I would make all of the calls, and I would have basically visions like I had when I did these calls the first time.
Mhm.
Except the difference is like this was much more like doing so with a rubber yardstick, and by that I mean like if there are certain milestones that you pass when you go through the aethers the first time. If you scry the Aether of Zip, for example, most people who have done it from the people, I mean, I haven't done a huge census of this, but if you reach the Aether of Zip, you will have an encounter with the deity known as Babylon. Which is this very feminine figure. She's kind of Shakti-like in my experience. That was sort of what I experienced with her. The difference with doing it with Gebofal in this process was I would start seeing signs of her way earlier. And like it was much more obvious that like, okay, well, this is clearly like Babylon symbolism, like what's going on here? And it's like, okay, so the rubber yardstick analogy just means it's like you get previews a lot earlier about some of the things that you would normally expect you'd have to wait for. But there were certain limits too, like the angels wouldn't always do that. So that's just like the first 30 aethers. Then what happens is the first 30 aethers, then the next 18 calls, they tend to focus more on, or the next 16 calls, I'll leave it at that. Those tend to focus more on what are associated with the Watchtower tablets. And so for that, I would still call the Heptarchical Angels, but I would also have my foot on the Watchtower tablet associated with that, with the appropriate day. And there's all the details in the blog, so because it's a lot to get into.
And we haven't even gotten to the part of the system where the Sigillum Dei Ameth is, carved in wax and all that kind of stuff, have we?
Yeah, that we are way past that because that's already done.
That's done.
That's done. Oh yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
this is like for me, this is all like a second round because I didn't just start with this. I had already like done the Sigillum Ameth and all of that.
Okay.
And now I'm in this other. I'm trying to I'm trying to increase, trying to get a better. The way I put it is, I was trying to deepen my initiation into Chokmah when it comes with this.
Got it. Okay, all right, that's interesting. I guess I don't know that I necessarily realized before this point that you'd already gone through like a whole round of Enochian work before you started doing this stuff.
I did that in 2019, yeah.
2019. Okay, so this has been a long process.
Yeah, I had started back in 2014, and for personal reasons, I had to stop, which was good. I needed the time to mature, and definitely going through the aethers, in case you're wondering, it will mature you even more. But that's good. That's what we need, right?
Right.
But yeah, I did some in early 2014, stopped, then picked everything back up late 2018, early 2019. And started making the tools and stuff like that.
Okay, interesting. All right, and then you did mention earlier. Okay, so we've gotten up to 46 now, right? So there's still
you did the math
more.
Right. 3 more.
So what are these last 3? So these last 3, and so since you're going backwards, we're getting to the first pages of the Liber Logaeth that you
Correct.
transcribed. So we're
Correct.
going from your most experienced reading of the messy handwriting to your first attempt. And these earlier plates, the earlier tables, are the ones that are turned sideways and
Well, actually, it's right around the Aether of Zip, which is about the. I'm trying to remember when this is. I think it's around page 25
Mhm.
is the way it works out in Liber Logaeth. But if you're doing that, then those are there. For what it's worth, there's only like 3.5 of those that are really bad and screwy that you have to
Mhm.
mess around with, and then the others, it's either only every other letter more or less for those pages, and then the rest are either all filled in. But then yeah, then so now we're, like you said, we're getting to the first 3 pages that you make in the book. So the first is now last,
Mhm.
to get back pick back up on that. So yeah, so the last 3, we're getting to the second and first spoken calls, and then we're getting to that third call, which is silent. So for that one, I was not told anything other than, because I'm getting hints from guidance, I should say, from the angels as to here's what you should do here, here's what you should do here. um, there's a lot of stuff going on. It's kind of like I can almost feel myself getting immersed back into it just talking about it again. It's a good feeling, by the way. But so yeah, so the next 2, there's no watchtowers per se. People have said that, by the way, if you're doing calls in general, apparently making the first and second spoken calls will juice up your experience of whatever call you're actually intending to make. So that's a little tip that I think comes from David Shoemaker, but I don't want to, if he says no and I'm offended, then I didn't mean to offend. But that's what I have heard through channels, but I want to credit him in case he wants it. If not, it's all my fault.
Okay. I
But
don't know that I've ever heard of David Shoemaker. I'm not sure if he listens to this
he's
podcast.
he's from Living Thelema. But
Oh, okay.
yes. So at any rate, let me just before I put my foot in my mouth too much more, what I want to say is that yeah. So those first 2 calls, they're associated from other people who have written on it. Again, I'm not an expert. I'm just a guy. But they are associated with invocation and evocation. And then there's that first call, the actual first call. What is this call? Well, the angel said it was not to be spoken. So what does that mean? I don't know. Not to be spoken until God's time, right?
Mhm.
So we don't know what that is. We're not sure what that is. But I had a funny feeling from day one as I was getting in on this. I said, I think this first call that's not to be spoken, I think it's just leaf 1. I think you're just supposed to read off leaf 1. So which is to say that leaf, that table, those 2 tables that have a bunch of words, for the most part, like there's a bottom part which is individual letters, but that's neither here nor there. But those letters also make up words. But suffice it to say, I had that funny feeling. I didn't know what that was. And if I think that's what this is, I wasn't sure, but I also had the intuition, I think I just need to read that off. And yeah, it was supposed to be read in God's time. I don't know when that is, but if I'm getting this very strong feeling at the core of my heart that that's what I was supposed to do, I went ahead and did that. Sorry if this starts the
Cliff, did you
apocalypse.
immunize the Eschaton?
If I did this, yes. Sorry if the reason the world is ending, it's because of me. It has nothing whatsoever to do with all the CO2 emissions that have been belched out since the industrial age. Yeah, it's all Cliff's fault, right?
It's Cliff's
But
fault.
that's okay. I'll take the blame. But I decided to do it. Now, I don't know if you've read 2,400 words in a foreign language that really has no native speakers, but that's kind of a tough thing to do, and it takes a while.
Yeah.
So here's what I did. I did it. I read the leaf 1B, as it's known, which is the back of that leaf, which that took me about 40 some minutes, and I went golden dawn with this. I vibrated it the whole
Mhm.
way through.
Oh wow.
And then I did the same thing at noon with leaf 1A, and then I did the entire thing, and that took me like an hour and a half in the evening. And wow, that was an intense experience. And I'll make sure this is back up. But you get the idea here. It's like this, and clearly, why not go out with a bang? Well, that's pretty intense, heavy stuff. And yeah, and what happened at the end of that was, so we've kind of been eliding the thing that people are probably really interested in, is what are visions like, man? And there are a bunch of them. They're on my site, but I did want to mention that this one in particular was very special to me. Now, if you go through the diary, there's a whole lot of very intense experiences that you can see. There's a lot of symbolism, there's a lot of math, and in between the diary, as you've probably noticed reading through, there are some of these like revelations about the way that Enochian is structured, some of which I'm pretty sure have not been discovered before, that the angels just like sent my way. And it's like, oh, thank you very much. This will be of interest to people who are interested in that. But I did want to speak about the vision on this one. So this is the culminating moment of 49 days, which had other stuff going on that was just, it was a lot of intensity. But what happened was, I had this vision, and if you've ever seen like a sci-fi movie, where the aliens sort of abduct somebody via their transporter beam, they get lifted up into the air. It was something like that, except instead of being lifted up into a flying saucer, I got lifted up into this black disc, right, around which there were these massive storm clouds, etc. So I got lifted up into that, and then I have a vision of myself. And my vision of myself at various scales going, from the quantum all the way up to the cosmic. So it's like it's like the cliff in this body versus the cliff in the universes versus the cliff at the very, very tiny. And I was experiencing all of this at once. And the experience that I had with that was the first thing that came to mind. It was a big theme that happened throughout the Aethers, was suffering. And the concern I had, I was speaking with the divine, and the concern I had in my mind was about suffering. And God was like, well, I could go ahead and obviously, God is always saying, yeah, well, but you get the idea. You get the idea.
I think it's Yahweh.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a human being trying to put words to the divine, but he was saying, I could go ahead and, have created a world without suffering, and make all these exceptions for the bad stuff that people have to go through. But I really wouldn't respect myself, because what he's saying is like, I would have created basically, for me to use my analogy now, I basically would have created, a bouncy house, cotton candy land without a whole lot of meaning to it. And I said, I thought, and it's like, I can really respect that, because there are things that I could do. But, like, for example, if you have a child and the child wants this and the child wants that, and you always give the child what they want, that child's never going to grow, never going to learn how to be, a normal adult and learn how to behave responsibly in the world. Right.
Oh, yeah.
So that was the sense that I got, and so there's that lack of self-respect for having raised such a child.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened after that was I got in the morning, I got a portion of this, as well as in the evening, and then finally again at night, I got a portion of a 49 word, again 7 times 7. The word number 7 comes up all the time in Enochian transmission, and some of it seems to match what is on that first page, that's sort of proto-Enochian, but some of it also seems to match the more recent stuff. And yeah, that was, and I don't think I fully translated it, or if I did, it was a very tentative translation. So, but yeah, it was intense. It was intense.
That sounds like an amazing working, especially, I mean, I guess one of the things that's really, really impressive about it is the fact that it's intense work, and you stuck with it for a very, very long time. Not only like the 7 months of transcribing the tables, but then 49 days of, 3 rituals a day using those tables. Like that's impressive. Good job with your stick-to-itiveness.
Thank you. And let me specifically thank my wife, who was very patient and who herself had her own stuff going along at the same time that I was unable to help out with. So she gets all the credit in the world for being world's best wife ever. So
Yeah, no doubt.
could you imagine being that understanding? Oh, hey, honey, I'm just going to ignore you a lot and just write in this book. And then, by the way, I'm also going to really ignore you for a month and a half straight.
Oof. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is an understanding wife. I hope that you got her a really good Christmas gift.
Yes, definitely.
Good.
Definitely.
Okay, now I do have some other Enochian questions. I kind of want to go back to some of the stuff you're talking about way at the beginning. I was taking notes,
Sure.
by the way.
Oh, no, my notes will be used against me.
Well, you were talking about and what you were just describing. It seems to me to be it might be fair to like describe that as sort of a theurgic practice, right? Like you are practicing sort of like this art of ascent. You compared it to the Merkava Hechalot methods from like really early Jewish mysticism.
Mhm.
But also, you've talked about using some of the Enochian stuff for like thaumaturgic work, for doing like real world magic, like magic that affects this world.
Definitely.
Where did you get the directions for that kind of stuff? Was that stuff that was directly received from the Enochian spirits or Enochian angels, or
Yeah.
yeah?
Yeah, they
Okay.
when they if you like the more like I bought way too many books on this, but the long story short is that Dee and Kelley, they receive that with the Watchtowers especially, but also the Heptarchy, the planetary magic, if in particular, like if you go to Prince Bornogo, he's got this ability to give you like the knowledge of metals. Well, that could also be like, how do you could use the philosopher's stone lead from gold, but if you know metals well enough, you know how to make better steel, you know how to make better this or that. Um, but the Watchtower angels in particular, those more elemental angels, they're angels of, for example, mechanical arts and transportation. And oh, by the way,
Oh.
gold and precious stones. Hey, you want to find that metal detector, go in the backyard and see where there's gold out back,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing. So yeah, there's it's already there in that initial part of the system. So definitely check it out. And if there's practical stuff you want to do, make sure your heart's in the right place. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's stuff that if you need, if you need a little financial windfall, I'll give you a quick story. So when I was first beta testing the Watchtower tablets that I had done, I had about a 50% success rate. One of these things that I'm counting as a success because the person who I did it for, I went on this Discord server and I said, hey, if anybody wants me to do some magic for him and just test it out, just let me know. And of course, a bunch of people replied. One of them was they wanted gold and precious stones, and I said, okay. So I did the ritual, blah blah blah. And I used Stenwick's method. I want to give him credit. Stenwick, Aaron Leach, and Scott Stenwick, Aaron Leach, and a bunch of others like Lon Mailu Duquette, just to name three of the big names in the field.
Mm-hmm.
They all have good books that can give you results. And that help you understand the system a lot better without having to go back to the diaries. Although the diaries are also very important, but I just want to make that clear that if you're just beginning, those are good places to get a good sense of the system. But
I mean, the first Enochian
yeah.
book I got was Enochian Chess.
Okay. Wow.
I don't know if you've seen that one. That's I remember sort of looking into it and being like, what is this?
Yeah, Enochian is hard enough, man. With
I know.
chess, it's like,
It's some sort of Golden Dawn board game that some Golden Dawn guy invented. Have you looked at it?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I have not looked into it, but more power to you for having opened that up and gotten however far you got with it, because I don't even I that is beyond my capacity.
It was so long ago, I don't remember. I'm sure I still have the book. Yeah, I do still have the book. But
awesome.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, the more you get into Enochian, the more that'll probably make sense too.
Right,
but,
right.
Yeah, so I did this ritual for gold and precious jewels, and I don't know if the guy's gonna find, I don't know, Jack Sparrow's treasure or whatever, but probably not, because he's a fictional character. But I look up so I hear back from the guy. And the guy tells me, okay, he doesn't give me, okay, I found, a nice gold ring or anything like that. He says that he found at a garage sale, and he bought for like $1 or $2 an antique desk that is worth thousands plural of dollars, and that was how that came through for him. Now, I'm going to count that as a win because it didn't come in the form that we were expecting, but it certainly came in the spirit of gold and precious stones.
Oh
So
yeah, that's
I was
amazing.
impressed with that. I have not had my windfall yet, but that's okay. You know,
Give it
maybe I'm
time.
just better at doing magic for other people,
That could
but
be. I mean,
maybe.
you you got to have a chat with God. That might be windfall enough.
Yeah, I will definitely take that. I'll definitely take that over buried
And
treasure.
weren't you
Absolutely.
literally told that your suffering is important?
Yeah, I
So
was.
there you go.
I
You're
was.
doing great. Just keep
Thank
suffering.
you.
Suffering is
Thanks
its
for the
own
reminder.
gold.
Yeah, it is important, and
Yeah.
it definitely I'm not going to say go out and suffer because that's
Ugh.
not that, but
Right.
if it happens to you, there it's something you can learn from.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. For sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. I hate getting that reminder. um. So beyond Enochian, like one of the things you've been writing about in your blog recently, we aren't going to be able to get into this a whole lot, but I would love to get a
Sure.
little bit of info on this, just so people are going to like go read it, and eventually we can maybe do a second episode about this. You
Ooh.
started working on looking at sort of parallels or connections between Tibetan Buddhism and Enochian.
Hmm. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what you have started to see, or what you're starting to play with, or what you figured out?
Yeah, so I definitely don't want people to say this is what Enochian is. It's Tibetan Buddhism or vice versa, because that would be, cultural misappropriation slash confusion slash what is this guy talking about? But what I will say is there are some interesting overlaps. So one example is, and a lot of this is experiential. I don't so please just, when I say the way I try to phrase it in my blog is I say I'm trying to bridge the two traditions. Does that mean what I'm trying to do with that is I'm trying to say here are some interesting connections that you might want to look into.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the interesting things that people who may not know about Tibetan Buddhism, and I'm not an expert in this by any means. I need to learn more about Tibetan Buddhism than Enochian in order to make this stuff happen. But what I will say is that there are some interesting parallels and similarities. So, for example, a lot of if you look at the one of the big color schemes in Tibetan Buddhism for the elements, there's you think about, well, what's it in Western magic? Okay, well, color wise, you have red, fire, that in the original Enochian system, as well as probably back more generally in the context of the magic of the day. Red tended to be in the east. The Golden Dawn switched it up with the south. They switched air and fire, but the fire was east and air was south and water was west and earth was north. Well, if you look at the way it is in Tibetan Buddhism, everything's the same except it's all a 180-degree rotation. So you have fire in the west instead of the east. You have water in the east instead of the west. You have air in the north instead of the south, and you have earth in the south instead of the north, which is odd in some ways, but it does make some sense if you consider the geography, especially of, let's say, China, where you have this big hot desert to the west and you have this nice cool ocean to the east of
Mm-hmm.
China, right?
Sure.
So it's that whole idea that's just like one little wrinkle to this. Another thing that I would say is that if you look at Tibetan Buddhism in general, or one of the big things they're known for is the Bardo and the dying process. So
Mm-hmm.
to make a very quick oversimplification, when you die, there are 49 days when you're in this intermediate state known as the Bardo. Well, if you've been paying attention in class, the number 49 comes up a lot in Buddha, in Enochian as well. You have 49 by 49 tables. You have seven princes and 7 kings, and you also have 6 ministers. So each king has 49 associated with that. I believe that's what it is. So at any rate, long story short, there's this big septenary feel to it now. Is that because they both are looking at the same sky with 7 planets and stuff like that? I'm not going to say I know because I don't. But what I'm saying is that one other thing that I would mention is that a lot of the concepts in Tibetan Buddhism, stuff that is kind of foreign to the West, the idea, for example, of the emptiness of mind, and the idea, for example, of a rainbow body. You can now you can translate this into Enochian language more or less. Now, what does that signify? Why does that matter? Well, Enochian is very powerful in and of itself, and yes, there are connections even to like Egyptian deities to some extent, straight from that original transmission. But to me, it's important to realize to look at Enochian as having the possibility of a lot of connections to other systems, and Buddhism tends to be something that I have more knowledge about beyond my fundamentalist Christian upbringing. But I have more knowledge of Buddhism because that's kind of what I settled on in my 20s. So knowing that, I said, well, which of these things could I translate into Enochian? And the Enochian dictionaries that are out there, they're not like tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of words long. We're talking like 2,000 or 3,000 words. So to be able to come up with phrases like empty mind, that's a big deal. And to also have a phrase, for example, a luminous mind, you could do the same thing. Not a perfect translation, but you could say a mind of light, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, you could also just very briefly talk about the word rainbow is not an Enochian. Somebody's going to say, aha, got you. Well, haha, I got you, not getting me. But the idea is that you can use phrases like variety of light, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the only variety of light you have is either intensity or color, right? So that's the sort of thing that you can make some connections that allow you, let's say you're an Enochian practitioner like me, who is also interested in a lot of Buddhist material, you can make some connections that way. And you can use Enochian possibly, I'm not going to say successfully, but you can use it in an attempt to gain some Tibetan Buddhist, in my case, insights. So the larger encouragement that I have to somebody who's into Enochian is, especially if you're coming from a different tradition that I haven't mentioned, is to look into the crossover effect into another religion. I've already mentioned, I already mentioned like really quickly on my blog how the god Amon seems to show up on that Sigillum Dei Amos itself, if you look at it. So it's just one of the blog posts that I've tried to put out there to help that sort of crossover, from Enochian into different religions. And my particular interest is in Tibetan Buddhism.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, I've thought about I don't know very much about Tibetan Buddhism either, but I have received a little bit of stuff with Dzogchen, which is a Tibetan Buddhism line, and looking at some of the similarities there between some of their practices and like some of the stuff that you learn in Western esotericism. It is fascinating. There are a lot of parallels. So you're still using then the Liber Logaeth tablets or tables that you've transcribed?
I have it. I haven't been using it just because the materials that they got originally were really that initial transmission was only meant to just sort of take care of to open up that third part, which is where you get into stuff like the aethers and stuff like that.
Right.
So that's kind of the main reason for Liber Logaeth, but it was also, in particular, the angel said that this was supposed to be an initiation into wisdom, or I don't know if they used that phrase, but very much paralleling the initiation into Bina, the 49 gates of Bina, and then the 49 gates of wisdom that go along with that. So yeah, that and with that, they were then sanctified enough to be able to receive. John Dee apparently and Edward Kelley were apparently scolded for not working fast enough, so they only got a partial goodness out of that. So I've been hoping that I did it as quickly as I could, because they definitely delayed. They definitely took it easy and just kicked back. But as soon as I felt called to do that, I did my best to get it done as quickly as I could.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. This has been incredibly informative. You have your website. Do you want to tell people where they can find you online if they want to read this stuff?
Sure. Yeah. Go to Enochian.today. It's a WordPress site, so it'll redirect you. But it's me. And I also have another website called YourLightBridge.com. That's more for coaching services and stuff like that. I do gifted coaching. I also have recently opened up astrological consultation, having received a pretty high score on the NCGRPAA level 1 exam. So I'm definitely a professional because I've taken money for readings now.
Well,
Not that much,
congratulations on
and
that.
thank you very much. I'm giving a reduced rate through the end of the year, $25 for an hour. That's pretty cheap, and it will definitely not be like that for starting January, starting midnight. As soon as that ball touches down, then and the countdown is over.
Hmm.
Right at the stroke of midnight, everything changes. But
Okay.
just get in contact with me through email, and you can reach me that way. And hopefully, I'll be able to shed some light on whatever it is you want to find out from your horoscope.
All right, that's excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really look forward to seeing what you work on in the future, and yeah, good luck with the astrology work. That's really cool that you managed to do that.
Thank you very much, Reverend Eric. I appreciate it.
This has been another episode of the Arnemancy Podcast. Thank you for joining me. I have been your host, Reverend Eric. You can find Arnemancy online at arnemancy.com, and you can subscribe to this podcast anywhere podcasts are found. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting the Arnemancy Project for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/arnemancy.